A 17-year-old boy ends up upside down inside a gym mat in the middle of a busy school day. The question isn't just how he ended up there, it's why the police closed this case less than 24 hours after Kendrick Lamar Johnson died. No investigation, a botched autopsy, and CCTV footage that just mysteriously disappeared. Who killed Kendrick, and what do the sons of an FBI agent have to do with all of this? Here's the story of Kendrick Johnson and his parents who've been fighting for justice for 13 years. Let's get into it. To start unraveling this bizarre case, we must understand who Kendrick Johnson was. There would literally be no reason for anyone to murder him. He was funny, polite, great at sports, and had very good grades. It's not often that any kid excels at basketball, football, and math and science. He was the type of kid that gave teachers hope for the next generation and a friend that got along with everyone. He went to Lowndes High School in Valdosta, Georgia, and like I said, excelled at sports, academics, and was a social kid that everyone liked. Everyone just called him KJ for short, so that's how I'll be referring to him from now on. KJ was also in peak physical condition. He was gearing up to apply for college football scholarships, so the 17-year-old was fit, he was fast, and most importantly, he was not a prime candidate to die from getting trapped the way he did. And finally, there is an enormous difference between what was reported by the media, what police reported, and what the family says happened. I'm going to try to stick to verified facts here, but one thing's certain. Somebody's lying, and I believe it's not the Johnsons. On January 10th, 2013, KJ stayed after school because he had a basketball game lined up that afternoon. But by 9 that evening, he still hadn't returned home. Naturally, his mother called 911, and here's where this merry-go-round of terrible authoritative action begins. The dispatcher told her that KJ missing curfew was not emergent and that she should wait till morning. But a mama bear knows when something's wrong, and unfortunately for authorities, Jacqueline and Kenneth Johnson Sr. are exactly the kind of parents that'll raise every kind of hell when their kids are in danger. Jackie marched over to the police station and filed a missing persons report by 11 that evening. The next morning, Jackie and an officer were at the school. Just as they arrived, an alert went out that a student was found deceased in the gym. As you've probably guessed, that student was KJ. But it's how he was found that's so bizarre. Some students had climbed onto the rolled-up gym mat where they noticed a pair of feet inside one of them. These feet, missing their shoes, were attached to a dead body that was wedged upside down into the mat. It didn't take long to identify the young man as KJ. KJ was covered in blood and vomit. In less than a day's time, all of KJ's bodily fluids inside his digestive tract had expelled out of his mouth and nose, and all of the blood in his body had settled in his head, making him unrecognizable and extremely bloated. Not surprising, the inside of that mat would have been boiling hot, causing decomposition to speed up on top of everything else. Like I said, KJ was upside down, but there was a shoe between his head and the floor. The other shoe that belonged to that pair was found outside the mat. Then there was a second pair of shoes found wedged between the mat and his legs. That second pair belonged to KJ, but the pair that was found under his head and outside the mat, that pair was not KJ's. Anyway, why would KJ have two pairs of shoes on him? He wasn't playing in the basketball game, he was just a spectator. And why on earth would he take the shoes he was wearing off in the first place? We'll get to the other oddities with KJ's remains in just a sec, because there's a lot. First, the police waited 6 whole hours before moving KJ's body to the coroner's office, and then it took less than a day for the coroner to declare that KJ had died of suffocation, and that this was an accidental death. Just a freak accident, that's all there is to see here, folks, according to the police anyway. They theorized that KJ had been walking on the mats and that he'd either fallen in or that he dropped a pair of shoes, and that he then tried to fish them out, getting stuck in the process. Neither of these theories made sense. The mat KJ was found in was right against the wall, with several mats in front of it. Why had he not attempted to move the mats to get to the one that had the shoes in them? And I'm not going to believe for a second that he thought that he could reach down 6 feet to get the fallen shoes from the top of the mat. That's a ridiculously long way down. He was a strong boy, Moving those mats and putting them back afterward shouldn't have been much effort for him. Besides, KJ's shoulders were 19 inches across, while the mat was only 14 inches across when it was rolled up. If he was alive, he wouldn't have been able to fit into the mat at all. Furthermore, he was found with his arms pinned to his sides, not outstretched like someone who'd been reaching for a pair of shoes. But if he was dead already when he went inside, well now, then all of this could make sense. The Johnsons had questions. Of course they did. None of this makes sense at all. KJ's father even went so far as to try to wedge himself into a rolled-up mat, and he couldn't even get in past his head. Now, I have to give you a warning before we continue. If you Google this case, you're going to find some pretty horrific autopsy photos of KJ out there. Some of them leaked, some were shared by his family, and others trickled from who knows where. And it's extremely graphic, and quite frankly, I don't think any of it should be available to the public. We don't like showing photos of the deceased on this channel, but since KJ's family shared some of it, I will too. Though I'm going to blur out the more graphic images and focus only on the injuries that are necessary. And before you go after the Johnsons for sharing these photos, it's not what you think. They've been fighting tooth and nail to get this case reported. They needed the public to see just how violently KJ died, to hopefully get enough attention to force a second look by people that weren't biased. I get why they did what they did, and I completely agree that there were incentives for authorities to sweep this under the rug. With that said, I'll keep it as PG as possible, but the following pictures are not pleasant, so if you're sensitive to this kind of thing, maybe listen to the rest of this video instead of watching it. Back to the evidence. Police did have a look at the school CCTV footage. KJ was seen entering the gym at 1 that afternoon. The wrestling mats were not entirely in frame, unfortunately, but he definitely headed in that direction. One student walked past during this time, most likely on his way to a class, and a few minutes later, 3 boys entered the gym too. None of the 4 passers-by showed any sign of even seeing KJ at all. On the surface, it looked like whatever happened during that span between KJ walking in and the 3 boys that walked in 3 minutes later. But when professionals were brought in to look into the footage, they found that the video had missing files, entire swatches of time just wiped clean. Not only that, 3 other cameras pointed at the entrances to the gym also had missing footage. Every single one of those 4 cameras had around 2 hours missing from their data. The crime scene was never properly examined. None of the crime scene personnel even wore foot coverings to preserve the scene. Almost none of the evidence at the scene was ever tied to anyone. The Johnsons said that the second pair of shoes didn't belong to KJ, and neither did a hoodie that was found in the gym too. Neither the shoes nor the hoodie were tested for DNA. They were never followed up on at all. They found blood too, splattered on a wall near the body. It didn't belong to KJ. Police claimed that the blood was old, too old to be tied to the day that KJ died. Still, the blood should have been identified. The person found and confirmed how it got there. Even if it landed there a year before, it doesn't matter. Investigative procedure needs to be followed, regardless of the age of the evidence. And are you really telling me that the school failed to clean up smears of blood on a wall for more than a day? Come on, no way did they just leave it there. So we have missing CCTV footage, police that closed this case faster than any other in human history, blood spatter that didn't match the victim, and in the middle of it all we have KJ, a boy that ended up upside down inside a gym mat for no apparent reason at all. Yeah, the Johnsons weren't going to let that fly. They ordered a new autopsy to be performed by a pathologist paid for by them, and that meant exhuming the newly buried KJ, and that doctor made some horrific discoveries. During any autopsy, the organs are removed, examined, and replaced back into the body cavity before burial. KJ's organs were never placed back inside the body at all. Instead, his body had been stuffed with old newspapers. Apparently, when his body arrived at the funeral home to prepare him for burial, the morgue workers were confused by the lack of organs, so they filled the empty space with newspaper. This actually isn't an unusual practice when preparing a body to be dressed and presented before death. Hell, morgue workers sew corpses' eyes shut to keep them closed and add cardboard to collapse facial bones to keep the face's natural shape. What I'm saying is that it's a gruesome job and that they have to get creative with bodies that need to be viewed by family and friends. But that still doesn't explain where KJ's organs were. His organs have never been accounted for. Secondly, this new autopsy revealed a small bruise at the back of KJ's neck, right at the base of the skull. This blow, confirmed to be as a result of blunt force trauma, hit KJ at just the right place to kill him. In other words, someone hit him and it caused his death. This was murder. And finally, KJ's fingers were bent at an odd angle, almost like they'd been forced backwards. No bones were broken, and the body was in an active state of decomposition. So it's hard to say for sure, but it did look like his fingers were put through some kind of trauma. As was the rest of his body, there were several wounds never even noted in the original autopsy. And remember, he was stuck inside a padded gym mat. There was literally nothing around them that should have been able to cause any injuries. He was padded in there tighter than a swaddled baby. Not only did police refuse to open a case, they refused to release any files or evidence surrounding KJ's death. If it really was an accident, why fight so hard to keep the file sealed then? The next move for the family was to file lawsuits against the school board, and the state for wrongful death, and to force a reopening of the case. And let's face it, the Johnsons had every right to do so. There was virtually no investigation done here. Besides the missing footage that they were sure was intentionally erased, KJ's recent complaints of bullying were never followed up on. A pair of brothers had been harassing KJ for months. The rumor was that KJ and the oldest brother were vying for the attention of a girl. Now, since the brothers have never officially been named as suspects, I'm going to be careful not to mention them by name. Their father, on the other hand, is a different story. Randy Bell was an FBI agent, so you can say that he was relatively well connected. Yet, another autopsy was performed by a third coroner, and yet again, the confirmation came back that KJ had died from blunt force trauma to the back of the head. You can probably tell where the theories are going here. KJ had an altercation with these two brothers and died after a scuffle. The brothers panic, hide the body, and call their daddy to call in a few favors. And I've got to tell you, this is the theory I'm agreeing with too. Two coroners have now agreed that this was homicide after all. The only question for most people is whether or not the brothers planned to go out there to kill KJ, or if it was an unfortunate accident. A blow meant to hurt KJ, but that just happened to land on exactly the right place to kill him. Hell, maybe it wasn't the brothers at all, and someone else completely. They've certainly maintained their innocence all these years. No student was able to place them in the gym, and they were in every single one of their assigned classes after KJ would have died. I think someone killed KJ and hid his body, don't get me wrong. But I do wonder if these teenagers could have physically picked up a dead body, hoisted it up 6 feet in the air, and then dropped it into the mat and possibly cleaned up after themselves before heading back to class like nothing happened. That's a lot of heavy lifting and quick thinking for teenagers to do. And quite frankly, I hate the idea that kids would be capable of such a terrible thing. Many feel that KJ's murder was swept under the rug because he was black and that the authorities just didn't care to waste their time on a black child that died. It wouldn't be the first time this has happened. And after all of the secrets, the terrible investigative procedures, the botched autopsy, and going out of their way to keep the files closed, well, I can see why the parents are convinced that there was a racial bias at play here. Others say it has nothing to do with race and everything to do with people in power using that power to protect their criminal progenies. Then there's the official narrative. KJ simply went after a dropped shoe, got stuck and suffocated. Yet two autopsies disagree. No one saw it happen, and no one heard his cries for help, even though multiple students walked through the gym during the 2 hours when he would have died. Whatever happened to KJ, he's gone. A boy who was set to get a full ride to college, a son who was incredibly loved by his family, who are still fighting for him to this day, a friend that everyone liked, and a young man that should have gotten to live to make the world a better place. Unfortunately, the reality is that the evidence was never logged, the scene was not preserved, and the missing footage and DNA are probably lost to us forever. KJ deserves justice, but those in charge of serving that justice made sure that this case would never be solved. To this day, police refuse to reopen the case. With 2 autopsies proving murder and thousands petitioning for it to be reopened, how can you tell me that this is not a cover-up? Or am I missing something here? You know the drill. It's your turn to give me your thoughts in the comments below. And, leave a like and don't forget to subscribe while you're at it. It's this amazing community that's keeping our lights on here at the Evidence Obscured office. See you in the next one, people. Cheers.